any bureaucracy and burdensome licensing regulations. So we'll have a review of our licensing regs and have input on that in the coming weeks and months. And then really having a transparent, family-friendly reporting process in place. Here's just a little bit about the goals here. It really is to bring all of early childhood into one place to work and coordinate on behalf of children and families. I do want to share, I think there are many ways we can help reduce burdens in local programs, and really excited about some of the things that are going to happen very quickly for programs. But we really want to take an opportunity to look at child outcomes across early childhood programs. Our ABC programs and Head Start programs have a requirement for child assessment and have that data, but that's not representative of all children in the state. We have children that are on the child care development program or child care subsidy or voucher that you'll hear about. There are children in early intervention programs. And so it's just making sure that we really have good outcomes data on all children, and that our programs are really high quality early childhood programs. A little bit about the priorities for the office. Again, not going to read everything to you, but really want to just jump into this local leads and what this is about and answer your questions. So, it does call for us to start a pilot of local lead programs, and that we would expand over time, to really look at your local community, however you define that. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but to execute a plan for your area. So I'm going to talk about some examples for that, but at the end of the day, it's really about preparing children for school, for kindergarten. It stipulates that we appoint and partner with local early childhood organizations that will be charged to support access to early childhood. So maybe in your community, there are 3 and 4-year-olds or children 0 to 5 that are not being served currently. This is a 0 to 5. It is a across the board for that age range, not just preschool, not just infants and toddlers, but really across the 0 to the time that they start, that they would be eligible for public school entry. It's to look and see what gaps there are in your community, to support local partnerships, and this will be a really big part of it, to create alignment among providers that are serving children in the community, and then really to have a comprehensive plan for your local area. The benefits, and there are a couple of states that have done this work prior to Arkansas doing it or being charged to do it, but there will be this local lead will serve as the formal state local implementation partner to execute the state's plan. They'll act as a one-stop shop and provide coordinated information about early childhood to families in that community, how to apply, how to access early childhood education services. It will support professionals to enroll children that are publicly funded. So there are some distinctions in the law, and I just want to make sure folks are paying attention to that. It is really about programs that receive public funds. So any program that receives state or federal funding is a part of this work, will have to be a part of this work. And it really is to help grow the capacity for quality early childhood, not just childcare, but high quality early childhood. And then really to generate local support for early childhood in that community. In the pilot year, which is what we'll be going into once we announce entities who apply and are awarded the opportunity to be a local lead, there will be a sort of a captain or a lead who, and that primarily is what the funding is for, to help you fund a person who would be that lead, that person who's going to be the captain of this, who's going to be working across the early childhood system to bring programs together, to start bringing people in to write a plan for that community and focus on what those goals might be for that community. So building that local stakeholder and then the strategic plan. And please know, you do not have to take notes. We will post this website. I should have said that at the beginning. All of this will be posted so that you can access it and come back to it if you have questions. We see the responsibility of this growing over time. So while this pilot year, it may start off pretty small, and it will be really about building the relationships between the partners and the community, and working on that plan, really starting to identify where children are being served currently. There's seems to be a lot of question about who has which children. And I know Lori and Jackie, we have access to the children that we serve. We have the data on those children, but there are children in some programs and maybe duplicated. There may be duplicated counts of children. So really trying to get a good unduplicated count so that we really know who's serving children and what type of program they're getting, and how we can provide access to either more children or to make sure that all the children we're serving are getting a really high quality program and a good outcome at the end of it. So these are some of the responsibilities for the program. That public facing lead or captain, that would be the entity for bringing all this together within the community. The stakeholder engagement, so bringing the early childhood as well as business partners. It's not just early childhood. You want to think about the people that utilize early childhood services in the community, that also may have an interest in it. We saw that a lot during the pandemic, that parents need early childhood, but businesses need it so that people can work and come to work. They would work on this strategic plan for their community and really focus on what goals they want to have. There would be data collection, reporting, getting to that unduplicated count, really trying to get a handle on where children are served across the birth to 5 age group, the funding stream that they are served from, which includes all public funds, managing those community level resources. So the funding that is going to be a part of this RFA and any future funding that the program might get. And then, over time, really focusing on coordinated enrollment so that we're able to work maybe on one single application that children, families would fill out, and they're not having to fill out many applications to be in different programs, but really a streamlined application enrollment process for the birth to 5 spots. And then really developing local leaders within that community to support the early childhood work. Again, we will be posting this so that you'll have it. Our team, the Office of Early Childhood team, will help establish a statewide vision for early childhood and align those funding policies and initiatives to that vision. There is work happening now. We have some of this work. We also have an Early Learns work group that's meeting, that's providing input, and there will be other places where public input will be a part of the work as we repromulgate current rules to align with the Office of Early Childhood. We would identify, empower, and fund those local entities as a part of this work to serve as the local lead, create the basic expectations and guardrails for local leads. Again, we want to build in a lot of accountability, but we want to really create flexibility for you all, for your community. So you all know your communities better than we do here in Little Rock. So we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to have some of that flexibility that will work for your respective community that you may write for. And then we would provide ongoing support for that work, making sure that we continue to foster innovation and elevate best practices. The local leads would then serve as that single public-facing entity for strategic and administrative early childhood leadership at the community level. They would work on building relationships and trust within that community with partners, and getting feedback, and then developing and building support for a strategic plan. So really working on that plan with the community level, neighborhood level data about the birth to 5 children and where they're currently being served. The application process. So if you're on here, I'm sure you received and have looked at that application. The RFA outlines the overview and expectations, the funding, the eligible applicants, the application and selection process, the template, and then assurances for participation. So again, just you can read that in the application. We're going to spend a little bit of time at the end talking and answering any questions that you may have. I would say, this is a simple application. We don't want you writing hundreds of pages or adding documentation that is unnecessary. We really want you to write to the request, and we tried to keep it as simple as we could. So for the applicant type, and we certainly talked about possible entities, we feel like we have some organizations in the state that would be very natural partners on this. And I see some of you on the call. So, I'll call out a few. There may be, please note, there may be a group that I didn't name, not because you can't write, but I didn't think about it. But we've had a lot of conversations. So we definitely think, a local school district might be interested in writing, may have an interest in this. Education service cooperatives, we absolutely see the role that you all play and felt like you all might be a natural partner. Our Child Care Aware, for those of you that do not know about Child Care Aware, these are programs that work as resource and referral agencies on behalf of early childhood in communities that the Division of Child Care formerly funded, now the Office of Early Childhood. So it's part of our Child Care Development Block Grant and a requirement of that grant to fund those. And we feel like those could be a partner. We've done a lot of work in the past couple of years with different advocacy organizations and groups that have an interest in early childhood, including Excel by 8. And we see communities that are working in that space that they could really be a potential viable entity to write for this. Lori, who am I leaving out? I'm going to call on my colleague because we talked about a lot of different groups, so I don't want to leave anyone out. But if you didn't hear something that sounds like you, a for-profit, nonprofit organization that has an interest in early childhood, that really could be a local lead. But is there anybody, Lori, that you're thinking about that I might have
covered? Everyone, and then of course, our partners as far as our grantees and contractors that we currently have.
Thanks, Lori. So funding is based on the community size, and that is really entirely up to the applicant. You could write, for example, for a city, if you're in a larger, more urban area, thinking, Little Rock, Bentonville, Jonesboro, some of the cities that are Fort Smith, some of the larger cities, or you could write for a county, or you could write for a region. I think we've all expressed a little concern about some of our counties in some of the rural areas in particular. So making sure that we don't lose sight of the opportunities for those programs. So for those of you who may be serving a catchment area that includes more than a county, it can be as large or small as you want it to be. But that's really up to you. We've tried to create flexibility within that, and you would identify that in your application. We will base the funding on that. We are looking at a minimum of $80,000. I don't want to get real prescriptive about this. We have some federal funding that we'll be using to fund this initially, and so I don't want to put a cap on it. It really is to have a person who starts this work and brings people together and is working on a strategic plan and a data collection process for that, whatever area they decide to write for. The template has 4 parts: the profile, and then the rationale for designation, the partner support, and then the applicant assurances. We will pilot for this year, for 23-24 school year, and expect to do full implementation starting in October of 2024, which is actually in the law. Talked a little bit about this, your size, the lead size that you want to do. That really is up to the applicant. So for some of you, it may be natural to do a county. For some of you, it might be a whole regional area or something. The list of entities that can apply, which I've talked about: any public agency, school system, Arkansas-based nonprofit organization, or business with an education or social services mission, or educational co-op may apply. So that's a pretty full list. You'd be applying for the opportunity to serve as the formal state local implementation partner to help us unify early childhood. So we're going to be doing this work at the state level, bringing things together. You would be doing it at the local level. So that our ultimate goal is helping all children birth to 5 be ready for kindergarten, and set that track for success in education. And then we're estimating that we will do, potentially up to 10 organizations this first round for piloting purposes. It may be smaller than that. We've never done this before. We may get a lot of applicants. We may get a few, but we're hoping we really want to be strategic about the state. So I do want to spend a minute on this. We want to have representation from all corners of the state. So we need north, south, east, west, and central. So that's what we'll be looking for in this pilot, to make sure that we have geographical coverage for all areas of the state. It's not necessarily going to cover the whole state. You may be covering one county, but you'd be, I'll pick on Northeast, but you might be, in Randolph County representing Northeast Arkansas as part of the pilot, or Craighead County. On the Northwest side, it could be, Benton or Washington County, or that catchment area. It might be a bigger area than that, but we just want to make sure that we have folks from all parts of the state represented as we do the piloting, so that we can get a really good feel for any concerns, questions, things that we need to think about as we go to full implementation. And then, I've talked about the size. As we go forward in time and do full implementation, we would expect to have, depending on the size that people write for, maybe 30 to 50 programs, depending on the size of each entity, so that we have full state coverage by October of 24 as we move forward with a rollout that is going to cover the state. Timelines. And I'm going to add something in here. We released the application. We're having this webinar today, this informational webinar. On September 13th, we actually, at 2:00, we actually are going to have some folks from Louisiana that have done this work, that represent local leads, so that you can hear from them. That will help you maybe, or really motivate you in your application, or give you some ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about. So just mark that on your calendar for September 13th at 2. We will have another Zoom webinar, but it will be individuals from several different parts of Louisiana, some urban and then more rural parts, that are doing this work and have been implementing for several years, that can talk to you about what it's really like and answer any questions. The applications are due September 29th by 4:30. Paige Cox is the assigned staff person to that, so you'll send them to her email address. And then we will notify by October 18th. And then our kickoff webinar will be November 1st. So it's I don't know, it seems like a pretty short timeline for some of us, because November will be here before we know it. But, we really are excited about doing this pilot and getting started with this. So I'm gonna stop the screen share and go to the chat box where you may be looking in that chat box to see what kind of questions we have. I just want to give you some ideas. These are just some ideas. Please know that, but you might think about, for example, in an area where you're going to be working with 30 early childhood programs across Head Start, ABC funding, early intervention, private childcare, public, we childcare funded and parent funded programs. And you may be looking at it going, man, in our community, only half of these meet the current quality standards that the state has set, and we want all of them to be at level 3 or higher. We're going to focus on that. It may be that as you look at your data about children served, that you're thinking, wow, we have a lot of preschool children served, but we don't have a lot of programming for infants and toddlers. We're going to focus on that population a little bit. Or maybe it's, we really want to focus on all 3 and 4-year-olds being served in a community. So maybe you want to focus on staff qualifications. You know, we have a lot of funding right now in the Teach Scholarship to help credential and degree early childhood professionals through the American Rescue Plan Act funding. But you may, as a local community, say, we're having difficulty with staffing. And so we really want to raise funds for that and focus on helping that once that American Rescue money is gone. So I'm going to start looking at some of the questions in the chat box. So just forgive me, it may get a little quiet. I hope you don't mind.
Tanya,
Yeah.
I can help you with that as well.
Okay.
The beginning of the chats were mostly just signing in or putting their name, but we do have a question on, will the bullet points be shared that need to be met within the community plan? Now, I did share the commissioner's memo link with the link to the application. So it does get, it does list the the pieces that Tanya shared with the community plan. And then we will also post the website that have those bullet points that were shared on the LEARNS webpage or the Office of Early Childhood webpage.
I see a question about, can you talk a little bit more about the enrollment process and what that might look like? I don't want to, I think I want everybody to be really creative in their thinking about this, but I do want to talk to you about a conversation that Lori and I are having that we think is a pretty sort of low-hanging fruit for us to work at the state level. We're talking about creating, or let me just restate that. We are going to be creating a 1-page, 2-page application, but a centralized application for programs that are funded through ABC and the Child Care Development Block Grant, CCDF, vouchers, here are different things, child care assistance. Because some of you know this right now, Lori may have children that start in ABC in the fall and serve through the school year through the ABC program. And then, as many of you know, little 3- and 4-year-olds don't have a place when school ends in May, and their parents still work. And so then we come behind, we've done this for many years with our Child Care Development Block Grant, and pick up those children for summer services. Unfortunately, the families have to fill out another application. So we want to stop that so that the application they fill out at the beginning of the year or at any point is the one that is used that will determine eligibility for those programs simultaneously. So, to Debbie, to talk a little bit more about that, and I would just throw a shout out to Batesville, who I know has done joint enrollment in the past. I don't know what they're doing today, but I know that those programs, school district, Head Start, used to do joint enrollment years ago, many years ago. And I'm sure others of you have done that, where people come together to do the enrollment for ABC and Head Start, especially. So I think it could look something like that, or it could be more than that. But I definitely think the idea of one application is something that Lori and I are very committed to immediately. Like, we already have sent those to our IT folks to work on. And that's something that I think you'll start to see pretty quickly. We're in this school year, but as we go forward, that would be the application that we would be using as the Office of Early Childhood. I hope that helps, Debbie. Other questions, and certainly I think I set it up where people can come off mute if you're want to ask a question, or if you feel more comfortable putting in the chat, that's an option too.
Can cooperatives select a certain region? Because, we serve broad areas. So is it possible to do that?
Absolutely, Marilyn. We're not setting that. I know exactly what you're talking about. And then I thought about that for you all. Like, you might have 15 school districts, but you want to narrow it for this purpose and for this pilot year to a third of that, or one portion of that. So absolutely, you are not held to your service area that you do for your cooperative. It can be within that cooperative.
Thank you. And then I noticed that upon full implementation, you're looking at possibly 30 to 50. So could cooperatives then apply for different areas and have different ones, different lead? I don't know what you're calling the person to head this up, but if they had different ones for different regions within the co-op region, is that a possibility as well?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to take that one as a note that we probably need to come back to it. I want to be really flexible about that for programs, but I think our goal at the end of this, Marilyn, is that there is someone covering everywhere in the state. That could be 50 people who's covering 75 counties, or it. So we hadn't really talked about it in that kind of detail. So I want to take that one. I do want to point out that part of our work at the state level is to, as we review these and make decisions about them, and I want to be really clear about this, is that we don't have overlap where people are competing with one another. We don't want to create that. Like, you're going to have your service area, whatever you write for, and you may expand that in the full implementation to your full education service cooperative area. And there may be more money available in that next round, but there wouldn't be
That was where I was
somebody.
going,
Yeah.
because a
Okay.
larger area,
Yeah,
one
absolutely.
person can't cover all of that.
I gotcha. Yeah. So there would potentially be more funding available to do that. And if you remember somewhere in the middle of that about the funding, it talks about the funding is going to be attached to the size of what you're writing for. Like, we're going to be paying attention to, you're right, one person couldn't cover, 50 school districts or 25 school districts. They might need a couple of people to manage that because of the sheer volume of early childhood programs in a service area. So that's a great question. We'll come back with any additional information, but hopefully that helps answer that. It is sort of, as we move forward with implementation, making sure that everyone is adequately funded to do the work, to cover the area, whatever that is in your first application and any subsequent applications. But to also make sure that we don't have overlap, so that, if your area is these 3 counties, that someone over here that's adjacent isn't writing for one of your counties that you've already have written for and approved. So it's just making sure that we really have statewide coverage and adequate coverage as we continue to move forward, into October of 24.
I understand. I have one more question.
Okay.
I'm noticing on the timeline, the applications in September, notified by October 18th, and then kickoff November 1. That's not much time to get someone in place, and you can't get someone in place until you know if you have the funding.
Oh, that's a great point. You're talking about hiring, like if you got the award, the ability to hire someone.
Yes.
Good point. We're running a race right now. So we will definitely take that note. And if we need to make adjustments with that, might be that someone from that is really a kickoff webinar. There will definitely be continued training for people who are hired to do this and supports for that. So just know that that's not the only thing that will happen, but that's a really good point on the timeline in terms of hiring someone who would be in that lead role. Others with questions? I know some of you and you're not shy, so maybe Marilyn asked all the questions everyone had. Anybody?
I do have a question, Tanya. On the clarification in the application section 2, eligible applicants, it states that no less than 1 county and no more than the education service co-op for it to be applied. But if I understand what has been said, there's deviation in that somebody can write for 1 school district or 1 area.
Yeah, I think.
Can you write for more area that an agency currently serves?
I think we were trying to be mindful of what is currently in place and what might make sense. But I think if you were in a really, really large school district, think Bentonville, where in that community, you got your district, but you have 200 early childhood programs. So that's really big. And some areas are like that. It's hard to imagine when you're from a really small rural area, but we have some areas. So we would be willing to look at that. I think we tried to think county specific, like that would be the size, but I think there are probably a couple of areas that are pretty large that might make more sense. And we're certainly not going to take that off the table if somebody writes it that way, if that helps. I think we
Thank you.
do want to make sure from a size standpoint, going smaller, but going really large, like going larger. The co-ops have some of them have pretty large areas. And I think, you got to have you got to be ambitious if you're going to go beyond that, because I happen to look at some of those areas and they're pretty big. So we think that size probably is manageable. I think to Marilyn's point, we'd like to think about even smaller than our full co-op size for something like this. So I think it's what works best for that community or the entity writing and what they feel like is manageable with the application.
And then Tanya, we also have a question on, can we submit more than one application?
That's a great question. We never even talked about that. I think you can submit as many as you want to. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be funded for more than one. So I want to be clear about that. We will probably be looking, depending on how you write it, what area you're writing for. Because again, we're going to be looking at it from a more global lens of who wrote in this part of the state, who wrote in this part of the state. Do we have coverage for all areas so that we can get feedback that represents the state of Arkansas and the areas of the state? But absolutely, if somebody wants to write more than one, they could. Other questions? So, Debbie, that's a great question. The hope is not so much that the entire state is covered. We would get we will do a second round next year, and by October, November, have statewide coverage. So some of you would have implemented for a year, and then you would have new people coming on next year. But yes, that is the plan, is that we would have, statewide coverage through the application process by next October. That's what the law states, by the way, too. So that would be our plan. They might just be getting started in October, but we would have identified the local leads that will be across the state. Other questions? I don't want to keep you guys. I know this is a very busy group of people, but I also don't want to miss any questions that you might have. So please ask if you have any. That's a good question, Amy. Send those to Paige Cox. That way we'll have a record. If we just stay consistent with that for everyone, just any questions that you have, send those to Paige Cox. The email is in the application, and that way she can keep a record of all of that. Thank you, Paige. She's put her email in the chat box as well. But I think that'll help us keep a record of all the questions that you may have as you go along in working on the application.
I also put in the chat box, the Zoom information for the upcoming webinar in September. And I'll copy and paste it one more time in case you missed it the first time, because I'm sure you all would like to join us then as well.
Thanks, Paige. Appreciate that. And I encourage you all. I've heard a little bit about the work. I have not talked to the individuals. I have a colleague who has, and they reported back really exciting things about what's happening in Louisiana as a result. And they're probably several years in. Maybe 4 to 6 years in, roughly. And I think it's definitely worth your time if you can hop on that September 13th call to hear. Anyone else? Make a final call before I give you back a little bit of time today. Paige just dropped in the next call information. She's put in her email. You've got the timeline. We will post this. And Shelley, yes, I do think it's amazing. I'm probably not sounding as enthusiastic as I should be. There's a lot happening around transition here in the office, but I really cannot emphasize enough the incredible opportunity this is. This is really historic, and we should all be excited about this opportunity because, think about the children, that many of you call me about that you'd like to serve that you can't. This is a way to expand that locally. And, it's hard to think about that today. School's just starting and we're all really busy, but the things that they're doing in Louisiana and local industry is investing in it. So just, right now we think about our little world and it's like, oh, the state gives us money, the federal government, but they've gotten a lot of funding in Louisiana locally as a result of this work. And it's unbelievable. So I think there's some amazing opportunity, and it is going to be a great opportunity for our state. So I look forward to working with you all in partnership and look forward to seeing you on the September 13th call. And yes, we'll be moving fast. If we change any timelines, I do think we'll probably stay to the timeline, but if we do adjust anything to several of the points that were made today, we will let you know, in advance, like we're going to move that date to this time frame, but we'll probably keep those. And then as you make your hires, we'll have additional opportunities for training and following up with the Louisiana folks and other things. This is going to be a whole year of, they will be busy. They will really be involved in a lot of support opportunities to make this successful for our state. So I'll look forward to working with you. If you have questions, reach out to Paige. She's put her phone number as well as her email address in the chat box. Paige, anything closing that you might have?
No, I just want to say I'm so excited to have such a large group of people who are passionate about moving forward with the local leagues. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to continue working on this project. And so please feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions. And if I can't answer them, I'll get back to you.
Lori, anything from you?
No, just, echoing what Tanya and Paige said, this is a historic piece in early childhood. It's one of those things, as we've been in early childhood, we've known there are pieces that we could enhance and do better at. And this is giving us a chance to really give the local communities, an opportunity to help us in the Little Rock area know the needs of their communities. So again, we look forward to getting these applications and going through them and developing those partnerships.
Right. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everyone. We will see you on the 13th and look forward to having you for the exciting information that Louisiana is going to share with us. So thank you for getting on. If you have questions, Paige just put her info in and we'll see you again soon.
Where will the recording be posted?
It'll be on the Office of Early Childhood page, Marilyn.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you all.